We're up to Tzadi Zayin Amud Aleph, all the way on the bottom of the Amud. It was a very long Amud. Okay, we're up to Tan Rabbanan. We stopped about 5 lines from the bottom of the Amud. It's the second to last word on the line. If you're in the art scroll, it's 97A6. And the last column on the last paragraph in the first column. Okay, Tan Rabbanan. Let's say you have a public domain and a private domain in the middle. And a person throws something from public domain to public domain, private domain in the middle. Okay, so public to public, private domain in the middle. Rabbi Mechayev, the Chachamim potrim. Rabbi holds you are chayev in that case, and the Chachamim hold you are pater. Okay, so we're gonna have to understand, why does Rebbe hold your chayiv? At the end of the day, I do not, in order to be chayiv for a transfer, I have to go from private to public or public to private. Over here, I'm going from public to public. Granted, it went through the private domain. So the Gemara explains a little bit. Rav Shmuel Damar Tavayu, both Rav and Shmuel say, Lo chiyav Rebbe ela b'rshus hayachid bekora. When Rebbe held you are chayiv, it's only in the case of a private domain that has a roof on it. So we're no longer just talking about public to public with a private in the middle that doesn't have a roof, but rather we're saying it's like almost like, imagine like a just basically a roofed area. So whether he threw it like through 2 windows and it went through a house, or whether we have a garage park, or is that what it's called? Car park, and has like a roof and it just has like poles and basically was thrown through this private domain. Damrinan, because Rebbe holds Besa Keman Demal Yadami, the house as if it's full with articles. But if it's not, if the private domain does not have a roof, then Rebbe holds you are not going to be chayiv. So what does that mean? What that means is that when it has a roof, we see it as like one. We see the whole space is kind of being filled, and therefore, even though the object is airborne, but since it has a roof on it, therefore it's seen as the whole place is filled. It's as if the object actually landed in the private domain, and then it continued on into the public domain. So that's why Rabbi holds your chayiv. The idea is over here, this is like a variation on kluta. We saw earlier that Rikiva held that as long as something is in the airspace, by definition, it's on the floor. Over here, Rebbe's not going that far. Rebbe's saying specifically in a place where there's a roof on top, that's when we say that it's resting on the floor. That's when it's resting, because the roof makes it seem as if the whole place is filled. Okay. So then Rav Chana, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Bar Shmuel, says, now based on this, you're actually going to be chayiv 2. Why? Because think of it, I'm throwing from the public domain, and it goes into the private domain, which is roofed, and therefore I'm chayiv 1, and then it continues from the private domain into the public domain, and therefore I'm going to be chayiv a second one. So I'm one for what we call hachnasa, bringing in, and 1 for hotzah, bringing out. Okay. That's so Rebbe over here, who says your chayiv, actually holds your chayiv 2. Yasser Rav Chanavik, and so the rest of today's discussion is going to be revolving more or less around this point, around that statement of being chayiv 2 or chayiv 1. So Yasser Rav Chanavik Kakashale, Rav Chana sat and he was analyzing what he heard, and he was troubled. Why? Lememra the chayiv Rebbe at Tolad Makam Avu comes out according to Rebbe, you're going to be chayiv for a 2 chataos over here, even though one of these is an av hotzah, bringing something out, and one is one is you bring something from the private domain to the public domain. That's the av, and then we just said you're chayiv 2, which means I'm also going to be chayiv for hachnasa, for bring something in, right? Because you're bringing it from the private domain into the public domain. Now, one is an av and one is an tolada, right? If you recall, there are many, and we're about to prove that Rebbe himself holds this, that hold that you will not be chayiv 2 chataos if you do an av and a tolada at the same time. So over here, I'm throwing this item. It goes from the public domain through the private domain, 1. Okay, then from private domain to the public domain, 2. They're happening all at the same time through one action, and therefore clearly under in the same instance. And I'm going to be chayiv 2, and that means I'm chayiv. And again, one of those is an av. One of them is the primary malacha, one of them is a tolada, one of the thing that we learned from it. Tanya, but was taught in the Brayso, Rebbe Yomi, Rebbe, the one whose opinion we just quoted, who says, Dvarim hadvarim ela hadvarim. So the Torah, when it describes the prohibited activities of Shabbos, the Torah, when it describes the prohibited activities on Shabbos, says ela hadvarim. Okay, so dvarim would mean these are the things, which is 2. Hadvarim is like an additional thing, so that's 3, and ela hadvarim. The word Eila, is the numerical value of the word Eila is 36. So Dvarim Hadvarim is 3. Eila is the numerical value of Eila is 36, and therefore 3 plus 36 is 39. Okay, so this is one of the places that we learned the fact that there are 39 malachos. But it says Rabbi Elu Shlosh Matesh Malachos Shneim L'Moshe B'Sinai. There's the 39 primary malachos, and as we pointed out before, the reason why does the Torah need to tell us how many there are? Who cares? Like, why do you need a listing of how many to teach us that you're only going to be, that if you do them all at one time, you're only going to be chayiv 39. Even though if you do all of them plus their toledos, you'll still only be chayiv 39. In other words, there's only going to be a maximum of 39 malachos ever, that 39 karbanos you're ever going to bring. So a second ago, we had Rav Chana, Rabbi Yehuda, Shmuel saying that Rabbi held your chayiv for two: one for hotza, one for achnasa, one for taking it out of from the public domain bringing it into the private domain, and then from the private domain into the public domain. But that would mean you're chayiv for av and tolada. And we just saw that Rabbi holds you are now not going to be chayiv for an av and tolada. So I'm Rabbi Yosef Mara Hamasnila. You, Rav Chana, you learned the statement of Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel about being chayiv too, regarding the statements about the public domain, private domain, public domain. The kashlated Rebbe to Rebbe, and therefore we had a contradiction of one statement of Rebbe with another statement of Rebbe. Anan at Rabbi Yehuda Masnisan. We learned this statement of being chayiv too as opposed to one in the context of something totally different. Of lo kashla, therefore we don't have any difficulty. Okay, what did we learn this statement of? Again, there's the primary teaching of public, private, public, and then there was the qualifying teaching of, he holds your chayiv two and not one. And then we had this question. But he's saying, this whole teaching of two, not one, you learned that in the wrong context. Let me tell you the real context. The real context is the following brisa, the Tanya. Okay, the brisa talks about a case of a person throws an item from a private domain into a public domain, but it doesn't land immediately in the public domain. It goes 4 amos in the public domain. Rabbi Yehuda mechayev v'chacham poter. Rabbi Yehuda holds your chayev too. Rabbi Yehuda holds your chayev, and the chacham seir pater. Rabbi Yehuda Mishmuel. And regarding this, Rabbi Yehuda Mishmuel comes along and says, regarding this last halacha of throwing something from a private domain into the public domain, and it goes in the public domain 4 amos, he says, mechayev Rabbi Yehuda shtayim. Rabbi Yehuda held your chayev too. Achas mishum hotza, one because of taking something out, the achas mishum avara, and one for passing an object 4 amos in a public domain. So it's now Rav Yehuda who says this halacha, and we don't have a statement immediately yet, and therefore you can't ask about, what about Rebbe? Rebbe and Rabbi Yehuda are not the same person. So Rabbi Yehuda holds you are chayiv. Clearly, he holds you are going to be chayiv too, both for an av and a tolada, and that's what Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel was teaching a statement of, in context of that Rabbi Yehuda, who said your chayiv was chayiv for two. And okay, so the Gemara now tries to prove that Rabbi Yehuda actually holds two, because again, the Bryce just said Rabbi Yehuda says you're chayiv in that case, and the Chum say you're pater. But now the Gemara is trying to prove that this is true, that Rabbi Yehuda holds your chayiv too. If you want to tell me that Rabbi Yehuda says you're only going to be chayiv one, then go back to the Bryce, where the Bryce says Rabbi Yehuda says you're chayiv, the Chum say you're pater, right? But how does that make sense? The Rabbanan are going to say you're pater entirely. The Rabbanan and that Bryce are going to say you're pater entirely, exempt entirely. What's the case? Again, the guy's throwing something from the private domain into the public domain. How could you say the Chacham are going to say you're pater? You're certainly going to be chayiv something, so it must be the Chacham say you're chayiv one. And then when Rabbi Yehuda said you're chayiv, he was saying you're chayiv two. And this is clearly the context of Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel, who said Rabbi Yehuda says you're chayiv two. Now the Gemara rejects this. Gemara says not a good proof. Mimai. Who says? Maybe really Rabbi Yehuda holds your chayiv one. Rabbanan pater legamri, and the Rabbanan say you're pater entirely. So how do you find a case where Rabbanan say you're pater entirely? It's a case where the person intended, when he threw the object, that should come to rest as soon as it goes out of the public domain. In other words, the person throws it. I'm throwing something from a private domain into a public domain, okay? And I say I want it to land immediately as it gets into the public domain, but it doesn't. It goes further, okay? I'm too strong, okay? And I throw it, and I want it to land immediately after it goes out of the private domain. It goes further into the public domain. And this is the argument of Rabbi Yehuda Savar. I'm going to include a Moshe. Rabbi Yehuda holds that as soon as something is contained in the airspace, it's legally viewed as if it came to rest. And therefore, and therefore, the person's intention is fulfilled, because even though it doesn't practically land, since we perceive it as if it's landing, because klutik mishuncha means that as soon as it's in the airspace, it's as if it landed, therefore he holds your chayiv one. Rabbanan Savri, lo amrin klutik mishuncha, v'lo yisavid alei machshavto. Okay, but and Rabbi Yehuda holds that, the Rabbanan hold that we don't say kludik mishuncha, and we don't say that it's a rest and it's in the airspace, and therefore the person's machshava, the person's intention was not fulfilled, and therefore when it lands much further, the person's not going to chayiv anything. Okay, but then based on the way we're learning it now, it would come out that Rabbi Yehuda would not hold that you're going to be chayiv too, meaning, and therefore hold your chayiv and av and a tolada at the same time. Rather, he would, from this brisa alone, it would come out that he only holds your chayiv one, and this brisa would not be it's not clear from this brayso that Rabbi Yehuda actually holds your chayav for a tolada b'makom av. And the Gemara says further, Lo sagadaydach. Don't read this brayso this way. Again, let's just review. This brayso, there's two ways to read this brayso. Again, the brayso said a person throws something from a private domain into a public domain, and it goes 4 amos into the public domain. The brayso said Rabbi Yehuda says your chayav, the chum say your pater. Now the Gemara wanted to say that, and then we have a statement of Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel says Rabbi Yehuda says your chayav too. Rabbi Yehuda says your chayav too. Now, read that way, it would come out that Rabbi Yehuda holds you are chayav for a tolada, even though you're chayav for an av. Okay, you're chayav for 2 at the same. Even though you're going to be obligated to chatas for the primary, you're also going to be chayav chatas for the thing that's derivative, the tolada. Okay, then the Gemara rejected this. The Gemara says maybe, and the Gemara tried to bring a proof to this by saying it must be in that case we're talking about. It must be we're talking about a case where Rabbi Yehuda's chayav 2, and therefore come out the chum are going to hold your chayav 1, because if not, why in the world the chum say you're not chayav anything at all? And the Gemara ended up rejecting that, saying no, there is a way to read this brisa, and therefore come out the chum are chayav 0, and Rabbi Yehuda will only be chayav 1. But now the Gemara says no. I'll prove to you from somewhere else. Rabbi Yehuda really does hold you are chayav 2. Why? Don't read the brisa the second way you suggested. The Tanya, because we have another brisa. Rabbi Yehuda Mosif af hashovet from Medakte. Rabbi Yehuda adds the list of the 39 prohibitions, lining up the warp threads with the rod and beating the weft threads. Okay, fine. He holds your chayav for those 2. Amrlo, the chachamim. The brisa continues. The chacham said to him, shovet harihu b'chla mesach. Lining up with the rod is included in the category of mounting the warp. Medakte harihu b'chlal orei, and beating the weft is included in the category of weaving. My lab David dinu l'tarai b'hadi adadi. Now the brisa discussing this, we're not talking about a case where a person did them both at the same time. Shma mina mechayav hayar Rabbi Yehuda tolada b'makom av, and come out that he holds that a person is chayav for separate chatas for a tolada along with an av. In other words, isn't that what they're arguing about? That Rabbi Yehuda is saying that you're going to be chayav for those things, and the chum say no, it's included in the others. So maybe we're talking. So it sounds like we're talking about a case where you did them both, and the chum is saying only chayav 1, and Rabbi Yehuda is saying you're chayav 2. The Gemara says mimai. Maybe you're reading it wrong. Rabbi Yehuda maybe we're not talking about a case where a person did them both together. Maybe a person did one each one at different times. Rabbi Yehuda does not hold your chayav for a tolada makom av. This is what they're arguing about. Rabbi Yehuda savra hani avos ninhu, Rabban savri hani toladas ninhu. They're arguing about which are these actions lining up with the rod or beating. Are they primary labors, which is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion? The Chacham holds that they're only tolados teda, and I'll prove to you that really the machlok is about if they are avos or not. Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Mosif, because it says Rabbi Yehuda adds. What does it mean? He adds. Avos. If you want to say that, it means literally he's adding ma mosif avos. He's adding additional avos. Ella iamras tolados ma mosif. If he's saying that Rabbi holds these tolados you'd be chayav for, why would he say he adds? Clearly, he's adding to the list, and therefore it comes out again that according to the way so basically we're leaving things right now where even Rabbi Yehuda also holds you're not going to be chayav for tolada b'makom av. It's marnami, okay. It's marnami. Rabbi Yosef ben Tavai lechi Rabbi Yehuda ela achas. It comes out. So now we have another statement which goes like our new understanding of Rabbi Yehuda, and says that Rabbi Yehuda really only makes the person chayav 1. The Rabbanan hold your chayav 0, and therefore, according to this read, also Rabbi Yehuda, not only Rabbi, but Rabbi Yehuda also holds you will not be chayav for tolada in the place of an av. Okay, I'm going to read Rashi. Okay, so now let's just go back to the Havina. In other words, we have not proven, and on the contrary, we seem to have rejected the idea that Rabbi Yehuda holds your chayav for a tolada b'makom av. But initially, we did think that he was going to be chayav too. So, according to what we thought initially, that Rabbi Yehuda did hold your chayav 2 chataos. Okay, what does that mean? What that means is that the individual, when he's throwing this object, I'm throwing this, what are these called again? Cup, whatever they're called. Anyways, I throw this from a private domain and I throw it into the public domain. Now, Rabbi Yehuda, what we initially thought was Rabbi Yehuda holds that since klutik mishuncha, it's as if it rested over here, and then when it lands 4 amos later, I'm chayav for that as well. 2 chatos. The Gemara asks, where did I intend for it to land? If I intended it to land right outside of Rosh Hashanah, right outside of my Rosh Hashanah in the Rosh Hashanah, then I intended for it to land there. And if it lands somewhere else, I shouldn't be chayiv. And if I intended for it to go here, then I shouldn't be chayiv for this one. In other words, what's my intention, right? We spoke about this so many times that when it comes to the laws of Shabbos, when it comes to obligation, it's only when my intention was fulfilled. Where did the guy intend for it to land? How could it possibly be chayiv too? Amar le, so Rav Ashi answers, but Omer kol makom shetirtzeh tanuach. The person said, wherever it rests, I'm fine with. In other words, the person didn't have specific intention, and therefore the person could indeed be chayiv too. Okay, pshita. The Gemara now continues this discussion. Pshita, neskavin lizrok shemona v'zark arba. A person throws something 8 amos. A person tends to throw something 8 amos, and it only goes 4 amos. Harikas of shem mishimon. It's the same as writing the letters shin mem, which have a name, which spells something, i.e. shame name, from the name Shimon, and therefore you're going to be chayiv in that case, okay? Because you did partial malacha, but the partial that you did actually is meaningful, and therefore you're going to be chayiv. Just like if I'm writing Shimon and I wrote shame because I've already written a word. But let's say the opposite. Let's say I throw something 4 amos and it ends up going 8 amos. Okay, I want to go shorter, but I don't realize how strong my release is, and it ends up going much further. What's the halacha? Do we say that at the end of the day, it passed the 4 amos point, or do we say that no, since my intended place did not land in that intended place, therefore I'm not going to be chayiv. So Gemara says, can we not learn from the dialogue that we just saw that Ravina said to Rav Ashi, if my intention is not fulfilled, then I should not be chayiv? And Rav Ashi said, yeah, it's only when I said wherever it should land. In other words, I was very open-minded about where it should land. But if I didn't, if I had a very specific intention, it wasn't fulfilled, then I should be pater. Okay, the Gemara says, wait, Amri Hari Kasav Shemesh Shimon. In regards to what you said, that the case of 4 and 8 is like writing shame of Shimon, he says, mi dami, that's not comparable. Hasam there, common look, siv shame, as long as I don't write, if I don't write the letters shin mem, lo lichtav le Shimon, the word Shimon cannot come out. Hacha kamdelo zarek arba lo mizdarki le tamne. But if I don't throw something and it lands in 4, it won't go to 8. In other words, we're going back on the first point that we made as well. In other words, the Gemara said that when I intend to, so again, the Gemara now basically is pointing out, if I intend to throw 4, and if I intend to throw 4 and if it goes 8, I'm not going to be chayiv because my intention is not fulfilled. Then we go back on the first halacha, which we said if I intend to throw 8 and it goes 4, I'm going to be chayiv. Why? Because it's like writing shame of Shimon. The Gemara says, what kind of comparison is that? When I'm writing Shimon, I have to write the letter shin mem. Okay, when I'm planning to throw 8 and it goes. When I'm planning on throwing 8 and it goes 4, that's not a partial malach. It's true, the distance is true, but when it comes to hotzah, the issue is akira and hanacha, right? So it doesn't have to land within 4 and then continue on to the next 4 in order to get me to 8. It could skip 4 entirely, right? So 4 is not necessary in order to get to 8, whereas shin mem is absolutely necessary to get to Shimon, and therefore in both those cases, it would seem that you are not going to be chayiv. I intend to throw 4 and it goes 8, I intend to throw 8 and it goes 4, we see from Ravina Rav Ashi that I'm not going to be chayiv anything because my intention is not fulfilled, unless I said, wherever it lands, it's okay. I do not have any particular intention, which is not our case. Okay, but again, if I had a particular intention and it's not get fulfilled, then I'm going to be pater. We will pick up on the bottom of Tzadi Zayin Amud Beis, God willing, tomorrow, by the 2 dots.